Today's procurement tip is on trust. Now, trust has been identified as a key factor to project success. The majority of functions within a project, including communication, contracts, progress reporting, and planning, are said to be dependent on some degree of trust between the client and the vendor. It seems natural that project delivery models would increase the need to trust and have stronger relationships to improve performance. However, when further examining the implications of trust, we have found trust is actually a root cause to why so many projects fail. Now, before we look at trust, we need to understand the mind of an expert. So imagine for a moment that I'm holding a water bottle in the air. If I were to run 100 tests of releasing this water bottle, how many times would it stay floating in the air? Now, this isn't a trick question. It's as simple as the question seems. The answer is 0. The bottle would always fall. Without releasing the bottle, even once you knew the future, you could say that you're an expert in dropping water bottles. Now, a key trait of an expert is that they understand the project and it's simple to them, just like this was simple to you. And because it's simple, it allows them to predict the future, or in other words, plan and mitigate risk. Another key trait of an expert is that they can simplify the situation for others so that everyone else without their expertise can still understand and see into the future. If a vendor cannot do these things, they most likely are not an expert. So again, they can see it simple. They can see into the future, and they can make it simple for everyone else. So without having to have their expertise, everyone can see it simple and see into the future. Now, to better understand trust and to better understand why trust leads to project failure, let's remember this water bottle example. Now, did you have to trust or have a relationship with anyone else to know that the bottle would fall? No, you didn't need to rely on trust or relationships because you understood the situation and could see the future for yourself. In situations where you need to rely on trust or relationships, it indicates specific problems. The first is that there is complexity and confusion and a lack of transparency on the project. You only have to trust when things are complex and confusing. Trust is never needed when you can understand the project and you can see into the future for yourself. When you don't understand the project, you will be forced to believe what you're told with no logical explanation, and trust that that outcome promised to you will be delivered. This way of working will lead to surprise change orders, missed expectations, and legal disputes because the vendor you're trusting is most likely not an expert. And we'll get to that in the next point here, which is, if you don't understand or you have to trust somebody else, there is not an expert on the project. If there was an expert on the project, the expert would understand the project, see it simply, and would make it simple so that everyone could understand. When everyone can understand the project and see into the future for themselves, there's no need to trust. And any vendor or person who requires you to trust is most likely not an expert because they can't make it simple and they can't make it simple for everyone else. Now, the third is there's no accountability on the project, and this is just a result of the first 2 points. Trust is only needed when no one can understand the project. And if no one understands the project, you cannot track and measure what you do not understand. And if you can't track and measure anything, then no one's really held accountable for anything. And so all of these problems with trust leads to a high-risk environment unknowingly as people choose to rely on more trust and more relationships. They're actually promoting factors which leads to the poor performance they're trying to avoid. Now, how to avoid relying on trust? Now we know trust might not be the best thing, but how can we avoid it? The best way to avoid trust is by identifying and utilizing experts who can make it simple. The client should not be required to have any expertise in what they're outsourcing. If the vendor's role as the expert, it's the vendor's role as the expert to make their expertise, proposal, and project status simple and understandable to a non-expert. If the client in any of these areas is required to trust the vendor, meaning the client can't understand what's going on for themselves, there is a problem and the project should be evaluated immediately. This can be done in 3 core areas by doing the following things. So the first is prioritizing vendors in procurement based on their expertise supported by project-specific metrics. Now, clients should use a process which gives experts the advantage. The process should only give credit to vendors who can provide claims with performance metrics that demonstrate previous success on projects similar to the client's requirement. For example, looking at this table, you'll see 2 different justifications of expertise for a vendor's project manager. The traditional marketing method, which is reliant on trust, and the second, which is a metric-based system which requires no trust. The traditional marketing method gives no real information as to how the vendor will perform on the client's project. The metric-based method shows the vendor's capability and does not require the client to trust that the vendor is the expert. Just by looking at the metrics and then calling these references, the client can know that this person can do my specific job because they've done it before and they've done it well. Now, the second way that you can do this is the vendor's proposal and plan is simple, complete, and understandable. The vendor should provide a full detailed plan and scope of work before the contract is ever signed and any work is done. In addition, the vendor should provide a simplified plan and scope that all stakeholders can understand. A client should never sign a contract without a detailed and simplified plan that is understandable to all the stakeholders involved. If a vendor is unable to do this, they should be dismissed from the project because this is one of the main ways you can actually tell if they're an expert. If they can't come up with this plan, can't come up with the details to the scope of work, and make it understandable to all the client stakeholders, then again, most likely not an expert. And key components you should look for in this plan include performance metrics and deliverables that are non-technical that you can understand, a detailed and milestone schedule that allows all stakeholders without any technical expertise to follow the project and know what they have to do, and a cost schedule and any key assumptions made by the vendor. Once you got this plan, you're pretty much guaranteed that you have an expert who's selected on metrics and now has proven that they can create a simple plan and see into the future. And the last thing though is after you hire them, you don't want to hire an expert and then trust them. They should never have you trust them throughout the entire project. So the project reporting should allow all stakeholders to know the project status at any given time. In the majority of projects, reporting should be done weekly. The report should be non-technical and simple enough that all stakeholders understand the project status and the level of performance they're receiving and any future actions that are required. Any deviations should be clearly explained and assigned to the person responsible so everyone knows who's accountable for what risk. If there are ever regular disputes or the reporting process is taking more than 10 minutes a week, it's most likely not being done properly. So each week, key metrics that you should look for include cost and time deviations with the % caused by each party, milestone schedule, key updates to the project with potential risk, and non-technical quality-specific metrics. Now, if you have all those 3 things, you are set for the project. But what to do if you're currently relying on trust? Now, the best value approach is a procurement and project management process which does not rely on trust or relationships, but instead identifies and utilizes experts. The best value approach incorporates all the methods discussed in this article or in this video and shows you how to avoid the reliance on trust and increase predictive metrics which provide true transparency. Now, to learn more about the best value approach and how this can be done, you can click, like, and subscribe this video, comment, but also you can go to pbsrg.com to read more about it.